Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. And in true online meeting fashion, we are actually late to start. So that's normally my fault, joining a meeting late. So apologies for that. Thank you for being patient. We're here today in the fabulous, magnificent surroundings of the GRIDSERVE Braintree Electric Forecourt. And we've got a fantastic array of speakers today. Which I'm not including myself in that list, modestly. But we've got a great selection of speakers today who are joining us to explore various angles of what the forecourt of the future will look like, may look like, is going to look like. And this is an exciting time. It's an exciting moment in the development of sustainable electric vehicles, in the development of the sustainable electric infrastructure. And we are very fortunate to have GRIDSERVE CEO and founder Toddington Harper join us today to explore some of the thinking that went into this fantastic enterprise. And I'll then go through some of the detail of the digital customer journey which the Braintree site utilises. And then we'll be joined by Ian Butcher from Intel, who will be going through some of the vision and foresight that Intel has got in this space. And then finally, but not least, there's another way of saying that, isn't there, Fiona? We'll be joined by Fiona Fitzgibbon from Diversiffi. We're very fortunate to have Fiona here, who will give us a real insight into some of the commercial opportunities, the revenue models, and the methods of turning these spaces, these future spaces, into commercial vehicles that will help drive the adoption and the growth, which is absolutely necessary for the EV infrastructure and forecourts in the future. So I'd like to welcome and ask Toddington to come join me up here in front of the media screen and go through a little bit of the exciting journey that you've started and about to explore further.
Super. Great. Thanks for that, Peter. So, what I thought would be useful would be to set the scene a little bit. There's a really big story to be told. People like myself who kind of live in the thick of electric forecourts, solar energy, renewable energy. It's all very close to me, but I'm very conscious that there's a big story to tell. An opportunity like this. With people here who are clearly much better at telling these stories than we are. So what I thought would be useful would to kind of start with a bit of background, set the context around what this is all about, what this electric forecourt is, and really why it's so important, and also how important it is that the story that we're delivering gets told in the best way to engage with the most amount of people. So I'm just trying to hit the right button. Ooh, that's the wrong button. There we go. I don't know if you can see me. Is that showing on the screen as well? They can see okay. Do I need to move across a little bit?
Fine, so just as you are there, it's
okay.
explaining it.
Okay, perfect. So, what is it all about? What are we trying to do? So GRIDSERVE's overall purpose, what's the company all about, is to deliver sustainable energy on such a scale that we can help to move the needle on climate change. Now, that sounds like quite a big statement. It is a big statement, but what does it really mean? To me, when I obviously think about this a lot, and this is something I come back to on a pretty regular basis, because this is the most, I'm quite a mathematical person. I'm a very literal person, and numbers help me understand the problem that we have. And this illustrates the challenge. So this is something called the Mercator climate clock. We hear a lot about emissions, keeping emissions at 1.5 degrees of warming or 2 degrees of warming. And we're going to hear an awful lot about that later on this year when we've got the climate change conference in Copenhagen, COP26 in Glasgow. What it ultimately means is that we've emitted enough carbon in the atmosphere at the moment so that temperatures have risen above 1 degrees of warming already. And when they go above 1.5 degrees of warming, then things start to go very, very wrong. We start ending up with runaway climate change and huge issues which we've already seen and felt and experienced over the last few years start to get a lot worse. the world's leading scientists of the IPCC, Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, have kind of measured the amount of carbon that's been emitted, what effect that's had on temperature. They've worked out what's available still to be emitted, and they've turned that into a number. And that number is what's illustrated on this screen behind me. And what it essentially says is that there's around 278 billion tonnes of carbon emissions that can still be emitted, which doesn't really seem like a lot in the kind of global scale, and it isn't very much, because based on our current rate of emissions, we're going to hit that level in less than 7 years from now. I saw another climate clock the other day, and they said, it's going to take 11 years, but does it really matter? Whether it's 7 years, whether it's 11 years, it's on our watch collectively. And so we are, because the time frame is so short, we collectively, those who are willing and able today, are the only people who've got the option to do anything about it. Our parents didn't know, our kids don't have time. And so there's a very, very small window of time that's available to all of us now to actually say, am I going to fix the world's biggest problem that I uniquely, through my lifetime has enabled me to have a chance of addressing, or not? And we're certainly going to give it a go. And to really make it happen, we need to engage huge amounts of people to come together, because this can only be done with a lot of people. And that's a clock that obviously keeps ticking every day. And part of that is transforming both the way we generate power, but also use vehicles. And we must replace hundreds of millions of legacy vehicles with new electric vehicles, and as well as generate all of the infrastructure to ensure that the energy that those vehicles need is provided by clean energy sources. So that's a pretty monumental challenge. But it's possible. As an example, what's behind me now is just an illustration of some of the new electric vehicles that have hit the market in 2021. That part of the problem is solved. Elon Musk, a few years ago, people were wondering, is this guy crazy, or is there something in this? I don't think anybody's wondering that anymore. In fact, every major auto manufacturer has now brought forward, either a single vehicle, a range of vehicles, or they've entirely decided to become electric vehicle businesses. But what's common about all of these vehicles here is that it's not very easy to charge them all, apart from, of course, if you have a Tesla. And Tesla is the only brand at the moment that's built its own network for charging electric vehicles. And so clearly, if we're going to get the mass market into electric vehicles, it's not just about making the vehicles or making the clean energy, but we also need to ensure that anybody can drive any electric vehicle anywhere without any complexity, and in a way that is a better experience than petrol and diesel. Because people aren't going to make this switch because the government, they have to do it eventually, because the government has now banned new petrol and diesel cars in 8.5 years from now. Again, that's a big message too. That needs to be get out there. 8.5 years from now, you can't buy a new petrol and diesel car. But people don't do things because the government, they might begrudgingly have to, but people do things because they want to do things. We didn't move over from, not so long ago we all had Nokia mobile phones, and the government didn't say you have to, replace them with a new one. We now have, the latest generation of iPhones and Samsung phones and a whole range of other solutions, and we've done it because they are fundamentally better solutions that consumers want. And so really to kind of deliver the best change, what we're trying to drive at, whereas the government is saying, you must ban petrol and diesel in such and such, vehicles in such and such a time, we're coming from the other perspective and saying, you don't have to wait that long, it's better. How can we make this easier, better, less expensive, so people can make the transition as swiftly as possibly and in an enjoyable way. Now, to really kind of nail the replacement to the existing system that we have today, we are building, what's more than an electric forecourt. I'm going to get onto that, but I thought it was useful to share some of the background. But really the whole ecosystem. So today's industry, today's automotive industry and much of wider industries in power generation markets operates on a well-to-wheel structure. So you have oil wells, where you're pumping oil out of the ground. The energy in that oil, people don't really think about it like that so much, but it's actually stored sunlight from around 300 million years ago. It's got all sorts of stuff within it. You separate that, you refine it to make it more useful, you transport it with giant tankers and pipelines, and take it to petrol forecourts, put it into electric vehicles, and then you burn it. Seems pretty crazy when you think about it like that. But that's how it works currently. in order to build something new, we have to build an equivalent. So we're building something called sun to wheel, where instead of oil wells, we're building solar farms. Instead of refineries, we're building batteries. We're transporting through the grid that already exists, as well as directly into vehicles through different types of charging infrastructure and electric vehicles too. And again, a lot of that is possible. In fact, all of the solutions that are, the amazing thing is not only is this opportunity to fix climate change available to us, but all the solutions are also now available as well. And not only are they available, but they cost less for the first time in history than more polluting alternatives. And again, that's something that people don't realise. That's other messaging that we need to get out there. People think it's more expensive, it's more difficult, but actually it can be easier and less expensive. So this is an example of a project we built. We built this in 5 months. It's a 200-acre site that we're also turning into a sanctuary for nature to protect species. And I'll come on to that more in the next slide. This project, built in 5 months, produces enough energy to drive 20,000 electric vehicles for the average distance you drive an electric vehicle per year, every single year. So it's really, really possible to make this happen if you have the will. And beyond that, as well as building the electric forecourts like I'm standing in now, we're also twinning these projects with individual solar projects and groups of solar projects to ensure that the energy that we're consuming, we either produce it directly on site, but if we can't, we put it somewhere else into the grid, and we net it off. We net off the energy that we consume at the electric forecourt with 0 carbon kilowatt hours that we put into the grid elsewhere. So we can deliver an entire net zero system, and we're delivering that today. But I think the other thing that's quite important to highlight, and it's very, again, communication, digital signage and so on, is that the other issue that's on our watch to solve is that in the last 50 years, humans have managed to wipe out over 60% of the world's wildlife. Horrendous. And that's also on our watch to sort out, because we're over 60%. That's less than 40% left. And unless we do something about it, then again, our kids, and certainly our kids' kids, aren't going to be able to have that opportunity again. So what we're also doing, when people say, "What are you talking about? Building 200 acres of solar farms? Are you crazy? Isn't that what are you taking away land from food and so on?" And actually, we're not. What we're doing is we're turning these sites into platforms to protect species. We're planting huge acreages of wildflowers, and we're also working on some quite innovative projects, including vertical farming, to still produce produce at the same level that we would otherwise be able to produce using the same land. And we use land that's not suitable for agriculture as well. Certainly that's depleted because of fossil fuel fertilizers. So it is possible to do both, and that's certainly what we're doing. Now, why are we doing all of that? Because we need to produce clean energy, we need to produce energy that's at a lower cost, and we need to build networks that enable people to charge electric vehicles. And so there's lots of different ways that people charge vehicles. You can charge them at your home if you're lucky to, but there's about 40% of people in the UK don't have that option. I'm a person that gets quite excited when I hear that the government's banning petrol and diesel cars in 8.5 years, because I think it will help. But equally, I fully understand there's a lot of people who get very concerned because they can't charge at home. So how do you do that? How do you fix that problem? You can't say, well, that 40% isn't important, and it clearly is. So you need solutions for everybody, for homes, for destinations, and a big part of that can be provided through hubs and electric forecourts. So about 3 and a bit years ago, we put this plan together, and we said, for specific neighbourhoods that, particularly people who can't charge at home because they've got off-street parking, but also those that can and who is going past sites on busy roads. We think what's needed is a new type of forecourt, a new solution that's designed kind of like from a blank sheet of paper, that's perfect for electric vehicle drivers. It took us a little while to get there, because my initial thought was, let's just take old petrol stations, put in chargers, and it'll be fine. But the more we got into that, the more we realised it was just very difficult to do. They're not the right shape, they're not the right size. What do you do with people for 20 minutes? And it just became more and more difficult. So we got to the point of saying, okay, let's just start again. And I guess this is, we had a unique opportunity, a bit like Elon Musk had a unique opportunity. He'd never built a car before. So he built an electric car for the first time and made it awesome. Well, we'd never built a forecourt before, even though actually I'm named after them. I'm named after services, Toddington Services, and so is my brother, and that's just extremely strange. My dad built petrol forecourts. So I didn't know what my dad knew. I didn't know much at all. So we and it's an amazing team came together, and a number of different amazing architects and providers of architectural practices, both larger ones, and one's focused on forecourts, one focused on the car, automotive industry, and came up with this plan. And people saying to us, "What is it called?" And we're like, "Well, oh, that's a good point. What is it?" So we gave it a name. It's an electric forecourt. And what are they designed to do? So this is what we said, because we were pretty sure that this would give people the ability, the confidence to make the transition to electric vehicles with no downside. In fact, we want upside. So again, back to that point of making it better, easier, rather than just kind of telling people they have to do this and begrudgingly they do. So that was the plan. Peter's got much better images than I do, so he's going to come on next, and I'll leave him to talk it through. But that's what we delivered, So from plan to delivery, and I think it's pretty clear we nailed it. Certainly what was on paper. Of course, it's work in progress. There's an awful lot we're still learning. This is the first week that we've actually had people who's available to sit down in here. So we basically opened up between two lockdowns. We were kind of open for a week and then it locked down again. We're learning a huge amount, but what we have definitely learned so far is that it works. People like it, and really it's very inviting for people, whether they have an electric vehicle yet or they don't. It gives people the confidence. I had someone say to me yesterday that, really interesting, they bought an electric car and they said, when I turned up at Braintree, that confirmed, my decision was correct. And I thought, wow, that was interesting. So they had an electric car, they've been worrying if they make the right decision or not. So it kind of, it gives people confidence. The first person that turned up to charge it was someone who couldn't charge at home, and that he bought the electric car just because we'd been building this. So it's really, really important. It's not built for today's electric vehicle drivers. It's built for the masses to help people become electric vehicle drivers, and in a way that really delivers a number of different benefits. And it's also built for people who don't have electric vehicles too, because the vast majority of people don't. So with that in mind, we have a number of brands. So the bottom floor of this building is a bit like what you get in a high-end petrol forecourt. We've got a phenomenal partner in WHSmith, the travel division. They brought booths and Costa Coffee, the post office, to be a fantastic partner. And it's these partners we're now rolling out into other locations as well. This is something that people can obviously turn up in the day. Equally, it was important that we built something that was able for people to come and charge their vehicles at night as well. We've noticed some very interesting things. People turn up and charge their cars at all sorts of times. We've even had people charging at Christmas Day, which blows my mind. In addition to that, we wanted to create an environment that was just kind of very inviting and very, very useful. The difference with an electric forecourt compared to a petrol one is you're going to be here a much longer period of time. So again, pretty good opportunity, certainly from a digital signage perspective. So downstairs, quite high end, looks a little bit more possibly like an airport, kind of vibe downstairs. But that's kind of what you want when people are there for a longer period of time. So we've got that post office. What a great thing. Post offices are fantastic, but they're quite difficult to use now. They're double yellow lines or single lines, and we're trying to make that easy. We've got convenience retail, we've got fantastic supermarket booths, we've got a full Costa Coffee, and so on and so forth. But then we had to think, well, what do you do with people who've gone and bought their, what they need? What do they do for the next 20 minutes or half an hour? In fact, we didn't even know how long people would turn up, because this is the first one. And there wasn't really a benchmark either, because no one else had built an electric forecourt before. And we realised there was quite an interesting opportunity. So first of all, build kind of a bit like an airport lounge, kind of a high-end airport lounge, that really just kind of, is useful for people to spend their time in. So we've got things like office pods, where people can work meeting spaces. We've got some exercise bikes, so people can do exercise. And still looking to see how many people actually turn up and do that. We've got high-end toilets. But the other thing we realised is that this could be a great opportunity to also help people learn about electric vehicles and give people the confidence to make the transition. So it also kind of really doubles up as a space and a platform for people to learn about electric vehicles and really have the confidence to make the transition. And we're so excited about now kind of being able, as the world starts to unlock, to be able to deliver that. As part of it as well, we've also streamlined how do we make it possible for people to buy electric vehicles easily? We work with our phenomenal partner Hitachi Capital. We have a leasing solution. Someone can lease a vehicle. It costs whatever it is, a few £100 a month. When you include the cost, when you compare that to a normal, a combustion car with petrol, it actually costs less to use an electric car on a monthly basis than a petrol one. And in addition to all of that, we formed a deal with an amazing tree planting company. So every vehicle we lease, in the background, we get them to plant 100 trees, in the right way of planting trees. So that's pretty cool too. And just to kind of complete the jigsaw, this is project number 1, the first Electric Forecourt. We are really trying to deliver these at scale and pace across the country. We're planning on delivering over 100 in the next 5 years. We now have 5 projects with planning permission. This one's very cool. It's in Uckfield. It's the entire sun to wheel. So we're building our oil well equivalent, our refinery equivalent refinery, and our electric forecourt all in one. And so that's pretty awesome. That's not just net zero. That's actually zero carbon. And this is a host of additional sites, different formats that we've got coming through at Gatwick Airport, Gateshead, Norwich, and so forth. So really exciting to kind of be here. Peace has done a phenomenal job from Beaver Trison in supporting us and helping us to communicate. We've been learning an awful lot about this as we progressed, and we certainly are very early on in the journey. And I think the role for digital signage and communication is just absolutely critical. We need to take people with us, and we need to communicate with people really, really well. We think we're trying to have a bit of fun. This is our table. There's a combustion engine. We're saying, there's nothing wrong with combustion engines. They're still perfectly great. You make wonderful tables. But it's kind of how do we bring this all to life, and how do we make this really inviting? And certainly that's something that needs to be done as a team effort. So thanks for giving me the opportunity to come and talk to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much, Toddington. Thank you for that. It's fascinating to be able to share in the journey and think about the rationale behind how you got to where we are today. And I'm certainly very grateful to be part of it, and I and the whole team have really enjoyed where we are now. What I thought would be useful is to take what Toddington has talked us through there as the overarching thinking, the philosophy behind the journey that we must go on, the sustainable journey that we must go on to get to a place where actually we all have a future. Dramatic as that sounds, it's entirely true. And the mission here is to help people understand that they can deliver that change. So the communication challenge is crucial, and it's really important that we do it in a way that's accessible and that people can understand and that people are able to access. So when we were introduced to GRIDSERVE and we started the conversation about 18 months ago, a lot of this hadn't really been imagined or thought through in any great detail, and was, as is often the case, an architect's dream. So we started with a concept video, which we were presented by the GRIDSERVE team, which looks fabulous. It has some audio, amazing. And as concepts go, it looks pretty incredible, but it hadn't been realised, of course, and how we got to that customer journey was really important and was a crucial part of how we started to engage with the GRIDSERVE team. So thinking about digital totems, thinking about external totems, thinking about roadside totems, typically associated with forecourts, but trying to reimagine those in ways that actually make them much more engaging, much more visual, much more digital experience, really to match with what is an electric format, obviously, and drive that future feeling that is aligned to Tesla and Mercedes and Volkswagen and the other companies that are starting to innovate in this space. So the interior of the space was really important as well, and how people could feel welcome. And Toddington was talking about how it needed to be really accessible and welcoming, and how when you're arriving here, it felt familiar, and you were able to relax and take some time to adjust to the new format, which this is, the forecourts of the future. So these visualizations that were created really started to put some meat on the bones for that. So, apologies, this is probably not entirely visible on the stream just because it's on a white background. But the first part of any process is to really think through the customer journey and the service map. So we started thinking, who is the customer? What is their motivation? What demographic are they? Where have they come from? Are they someone that's just started on their EV journey? Are they an existing EV owner? Do they have expectations? Do they have fears that need to be allayed? Are there myths that we can influence and bust as part of the design process when we're looking at the space and creating the design? And thinking about colour schemes, and a lot of this work was with Toddington's brother Heston, who, in his team, who were fantastic and really helped us to understand and get under the skin of where GRIDSERVE was as a brand. And we can take no credit for some of that key thinking that existed already. But where we did start to really help was to lighten the tone of these messages. So a lot of the iconography, a lot of the colour schemes, a lot of the messaging that goes alongside any forecourt process that you may have is challenging sometimes and isn't always very accessible. So being able to make it a bit more fun, adding influence to this that's a bit more engaging and starts to really align you to the brand and create a bit more brand affinity. So you're familiar with each of these elements as you move around the site. And that moved through to not just digital elements, but also the non-digital elements. So whether that's face masks or bags or the tags that we think about putting in cars, the whole gamut of all the assets that you'd think about. And with digital, Toddington was talking about the experience that we wanted people to understand in the space and start to explore what EV ownership is. A lot of the people that come here do not have an EV, electric vehicle. They are exploring what it looks like and would it work for them. And so being able to provide a digital experience using touchscreens, which can walk through the offers, which can walk through some of the benefits and the cost savings that can be achieved, was really important, and understanding the users as well. And then thinking about the meeting spaces, when you're charging an EV, you may be here for 5 or 10 minutes, you may be here for half an hour, you may choose to be here for longer than that because you want to utilise your time in an efficient way and have a meeting. And the spaces that we have here and the different pods are fabulous. They're unique experiences to GRIDSERVE and are fully digital and utilise a touchscreen to gain access and have screens in them for meetings and super fast Wi-Fi up and down. So we were able to then provide a digital experience which can be booked using a QR code and easily provide access through a simple 4-digit PIN code that can be entered on the screen. So it's a totally unassisted process which you can walk in and book every 15 minutes. Every 15 minutes, Amanda? I keep forgetting. 1 hour. Book per hour. 15 minutes to come in the future. So with all of that in mind, we then were able to start understanding how this would manifest in reality. And Toddington talked about the lockdown process, and of course 18 months ago it was just before the pandemic hit, and that didn't stop GRIDSERVE, and the momentum was carried forward through the following months, and amazing, I didn't manage to put that picture in, I'm really sorry, Amanda, and the amazing progress was made through those months here. And a lot of the problems opportunities that arise through a first time were explored, and I think it's incredible to see how that visualization, that imagination that drew we drew earlier on has really turned into a reality. One of our processes that we really enjoyed when we were getting towards the implementation phase with GRIDSERVE, we was doing some testing in real time, in the real world, using the exact elements that we were going to implement, and really helping everyone understand just what it was going to do and how it was going to work. So the end result, we think, and are very proud to be associated with, think is fantastic. And this short piece gives everyone a vision of what it looks like today. And I think you can all appreciate just how transformational this space is now for anybody that's thinking about these transitions that they've got to make in their lives. I've done various straw polls amongst friends and peers, and the same challenges always arise, and Toddington talked about it a little bit earlier on. Where will I charge my vehicle? How will I get there? Am I going to run out of charge? What happens? How long does it take to charge? All of these challenges are very real, and people feel them very personally. And it is a block and an obstacle to the further adoption. So the forecourt of the future really needs to address those very clearly with people and reassure them that you can reliably charge any time of the day or night at a reasonable price and get to where you want to get to with multiple stops if you choose to, and always get the same level of service at those destinations. And what GRIDSERVE is really pioneering is the concept of a much broader, much more democratised, much more accessible EV sustainable future for everyone. And it really is essential. Only today, there was an article that was talking about the committee of MPs really highlighting how challenging it is for the government to actually achieve the 2030 deadline for the adoption of, or the stopping of sales of new diesel and petrol vehicles, because of the challenges of cost, accessibility and infrastructure. And I think it's incumbent on everyone to follow the lead of GRIDSERVE to really start to address those things. They'll have a job, because this is pretty amazing and it takes years to get to this space. So I think we'll be seeing a lot more GRIDSERVEs popping up as we move through. So the communication methods that we're using are driving people into the spaces. The chargers are absolutely central to the process that people go through. If you've got an EV, you'll probably be aware of the various challenges over the years of having different apps, the functional or not functional status of those chargers. These chargers are amazing. They're 350 kilowatt chargers, some of the fastest in the country. And they are simply operated by a contactless card. You don't need to join anything. You don't need to have an app. You walk up, drive up, don't walk up, you drive up and you simply charge. And that's revolutionary. It's changing the way that people perceive the electric vehicle infrastructure challenges that we face. And then being able to use the touchscreens in the space to browse the deals that exist and that have been created to make it affordable and cost effective for ownership is really important. And of course everyone's coming here to use the bikes. Toddington, I don't know what you're talking about. They're really popular. People on them there. what people don't realise is that helps charge the cars. So that energy that you produce when you cycle is going back into the grid, and it might not be much, but it's a little something. So we'll be seeing Adrian on that a bit later on, and we'll post that on Twitter. So I just wanted to show you this video. This, I think, is an incredible piece of drone footage, but it's also an amazing piece of content, because this at the top is CGI, and this at the bottom is the real world. And I'd just ask you to marvel at just how incredibly accurate and how close GRIDSERVE have achieved what they set out to achieve all those many months ago. And I think it's a testament to the vision of Toddington and Heston and the GRIDSERVE team to exactly where we are today. But also I think it should give us all great hope for the future, that the infrastructure that needs to be put into place is certainly going to be pretty impressive when it's there. I'm a great lover of sci-fi, technology and everything else, and I'm very grateful that the process that's been done here is a beautiful blend of both technology, accessible infrastructure and great architectural design. And I think it's an incredible achievement to have reached this point with just the first. And who knows, it's very exciting to imagine just where this is going to go from here on in. And if you're anywhere near Braintree, I urge you to come and visit. And who knows, maybe even buy an EV. Thank you very much. That's a little piece for us about GRIDSERVE. Now, I'd like to invite Toddington to join me on the stage. We'll call it a stage? Let's call it a stage. To answer maybe one or two questions that we've got from both our audience here and also our audience online. So forgive me also, just get my magical device.
Kind of is a stage. It was kind of designed to be a bit like one.
It feels like
one. It was designed to be very flexible.
It feels like one. So, so first question, Toddington. Is it true that your Electric Forecourt, the Electric Forecourt, is completely off the grid?
No, it's definitely not. So it has so we're called GRIDSERVE as a company, and again that was part of our DNA of getting to a world that exists on purely renewable energy and clean energy sources is quite tricky, particularly when you start adding in 350 kilowatt chargers and lots of them. And so what we set about doing is being the solution to the problems that we're helping to create. So that's in our name, GRIDSERVE. So this project has a 5 megawatt grid connection, which, to put that in perspective, that's enough energy to charge 20,000 miles of energy into electric vehicles every hour. But in addition to that, we have a battery. You have there quite a large one that can store around 24,000 miles of energy, and we are using that grid connection to stabilise the grid in the area, as well as to facilitate charging here too. So it's actually part of the income stream. 4 or 5 years ago, when we started trying to work through this concept, we weren't where we are today, where electric vehicles are mainstream. I was sure that this would be useful and necessary, but we had to do everything we could to convince people that this was a good idea, and that includes saying, well, if we're not, if it's not going to be rammed for electric vehicles and that's what the grid's used for, let's find other ways that will make money in the meantime. So in the background we're balancing the grid in the local area. We're actually helping to keep the lights on. So constantly, the grid doesn't store energy. There's a constant need for power. In one way, it's producing and increasing, and renewable energy does the same. So we're balancing that grid as well as balancing this here. So a grid connection we have, it's very important. The other picture that I showed you of the new site we've got planning permission for in Upfield, it has a grid connection, but most of the energy won't be coming from the grid. So most of the energy will be coming from the solar farm next door. And so as opposed to net zero carbon energy, that will actually be zero carbon energy. So energy will come directly from the sun, put it into a big battery, and then when it's ready, put that into a small battery in an electric car, and that will be without requirement of the grid.
That's incredible.
And I guess that also is in some ways related to some of the new ideas around using electric vehicles as grid storage overnight for pull back into the grid or not. Is that similar kind of technology thinking? It's but just on a much larger scale.
Yeah, it's just difficult. So Edison and Tesla, many years ago, over 100 years ago, designed how the national grid would work, and it was a small number of big fossil fuel power stations that we all remember cooling towers. I don't see them very often anymore, but basically a cooling tower meant that 70% or more of all of the energy that you were making, you couldn't cope with it because it turned into heat. Only 30% or less actually became electricity. So you build these huge cooling towers just to kind of get rid of that heat. And there was a small number of those very big things, and power went kind of one way, and it was quite easy to balance and manage. And we're moving away from that. Instead of having a small number of very big, inefficient, highly polluted power stations, we're going to have a much larger number of much smaller, completely intermittent power stations, and that creates huge amounts of stress in the grid. Equally, there was something that came out yesterday from the IEA, International Energy Agency, which is I think that's a watershed moment, because they were set up to ensure countries had adequate amounts of oil supplies to keep countries going, and they were basically saying we cannot advocate any more investment in oil and gas infrastructure. But they also, as part of it, and as part of the wider report, said we also need to ban boilers in your homes by 2025, and that means more heat pumps. That means more stress in the grid. In addition to using your grid connections at home for charging vehicles as well. So it's all really difficult. It's all quite a mess in terms of getting where we need to get to.
It sounds like GRIDSERVE and the sustainable plans that you've got are going to help stabilise some of those challenges at scale once we hit the 100.
We can't expect somebody else to solve this problem for us.
No.
We collectively have to fix it. It's up to us. And there isn't, as I said before, there is no book of how do you fix this, how do you get to net zero. And just it involves sustainable business models, trying to do things the right way. Unfortunately, as I said, the economics are on the side. And that's kind of why I have hope. A few years ago I was starting to worry, to be perfectly honest, because I'm in this zone all day, every day, and I think about how to actually fix these problems. I was starting to think, this is how do we do this? And not only are the economics of these solutions now better than more polluting alternatives, but strangely enough, the pandemic has kind of given me a bit of hope as well, that if people realise the problem is big enough, then the 7 years I was talking about that's remaining, that we've got to prevent temperatures rising by 1.5 degrees. We remember what happened when the pandemic hit. Within 7 days we weren't working from our offices anymore. The world stopped. We stopped travelling. We stopped moving. And if people apply the same level of importance to what's clearly an even bigger challenge, because once you haven't got your home anymore, your planet, you can't get a jab and fix it.
I remember you saying the imperative was real.
It
was very
real.
obvious to people.
And that's why it's so important, what you do in terms of digital signage. We can build this infrastructure, we can deliver it, but how do we communicate this? And that's not our bag. We need to get really good at that, and that's why we need to work with experts in the space to kind of engage people in their very, very busy lives. No, this is really important, but also to make it easy. How do you make it easy?
Accessibility to that message. So, a question from one of our viewers. I was going to ask you why you have built from scratch rather than, you mentioned it when you were talking actually, rather than repurposing an existing petrol station. What do you think will happen to those old petrol and gas stations?
Yeah, so I think the answer is that a combination of solutions is necessary. So we're not just building electric forecourts, because you can't put them everywhere. There isn't the space. And equally, you saw we've got different designs of forecourts too, electric forecourts too. But we're equally putting charging infrastructure in other locations. So we're putting chargers on the motorway network. We're about to put a lot of chargers on the motorway network in the next few months. Starting today, actually, was the first one's going in, and IKEA's as well. And we're also keen to put chargers in petrol forecourts, where other people have got them. It's difficult though, because it takes longer, certainly at the moment, probably forever actually, certainly a good while, to charge an electric car than a petrol car. Probably always will take a bit longer. Not that much longer in the future, but always a bit. And so if you need the same amount of people going through the door, that basically means you need more than the equivalent number of petrol pumps you have today. And you often don't have that space. And you certainly don't have that space if you've also got the petrol pumps. And people don't want to get rid of the petrol pumps because 5% or more of the cars are still petrol. And it's high power charging, the level we're doing, next to petrol, it's not an ideal fit. People don't want you to use your mobile phone on your petrol forecourt. You start putting in megawatts of power. It's not ideal. So it's just tricky. So I don't know. We have repurposed one petrol forecourt to an electric forecourt. So we're quite proud about that. That's why we had to come up with different designs and shapes. Some of them I think will be suitable, and some of them won't. And we're on a mission. We're not actually on a mission to build electric forecourts. That's part of what we have to build to achieve the objective of delivering sustainable energy, moving the needle on climate change, and doing it quickly. So that's why I said we started with petrol forecourts. We thought, that's easy. Let's do that. So we're not for or against any of this. We want to get on with it. And if there are suitable locations, then we'd like to do it. And if there are people out there, even possibly listening, that might want us to put chargers in some of their locations, then we'd love to do it too. But we do want to make sure that those locations are right for EV drivers. And that's really, really important because there's nothing wrong. And like I was charging at one of the main kind of fuel chargers the other day, one of the big brands, and it said, after you've used your app to turn on the charger, put your phone in the pocket, don't use it anymore. Which is not really.
How does the commercial model work then for you here? So when you're thinking about a forecourt environment, you talked about the time, the dwell, it takes longer, even if it's 5 minutes longer. That commercial model, that experience, was obviously central to your thinking right at the beginning. How did you see that as being a model for making it work and getting people through the door, as you talked?
Yeah, so the chargers that we're putting in today can physically charge, could theoretically, but 100 miles of charging within 5 minutes, or 200 miles within 10 minutes. But that's theoretically. The cars won't accept that power. In fact, most charging sessions that we're seeing here are still over half an hour, and it will be for a while. So we had to have a really good think about, that's quite a lot of time compared to petrol and diesel. And we sort of thought, with our kind of same mentality of removing all the disadvantages and replacing them with benefits, we thought, well, how can we make that half an hour a really useful part of your day, your week? And so we've had a good think. I mean, everywhere we can, we're thinking, let's have a Costa, let's have a coffee. You'd be surprised how quickly half an hour goes. Let's book a meeting room pod. Let's have some space you can sit down to do some emails. We've got an awesome kids area. We've got some exercise bikes. We've got an outdoor area. We've got a picnic lounge. We've got a place that dogs. So on and so forth. So, we're just trying to make, again, remove any disadvantages, make it advantages, and create an environment that people want to spend half an hour or more in. So it's not a drag. It's not a chore. You're not sitting in your car like just, I'm not allowed to get out of it because I'm not allowed to use my phone, and so on and so forth. And I'm sure there's more to come. This is forecourt number 1. I think we've done a pretty reasonable job for the first one, but we've learned a lot as well. And again, if there's any people who've got other ideas on how we can do things better, we'd love to hear them.
One of the questions that's come in from our viewers says, I love what you have done, in capital letters. Thank you, Toddington. Any thoughts on expanding into continental Europe?
Yes. So we definitely would like to. What we've been building so far is a template, and it's quite a complex template because it's everything from sun to wheel, from harvesting the energy, processing it, new forecourts, and also other hubs we call them. So this is an electric forecourt, we also have an electric hub, we put it in somebody else's location. Knitting it all together to be a network, and now we're working on software that will allow people to use the network in a really easy way. So you can say, right, I'm going to go from here to Scotland, and it will say, no problem, stop here, here and here, and it'll be fine. And that's the template, all of that. And so the idea is that now we've built that and continuing to build it, we want to replicate that in other territories. So we're very focused on the UK because this is our home territory and we're learning a lot. But certainly everything we're learning, we're approaching this from a view of this is a template. In fact, even this building, the thing that it was very quick to build. This whole building went up in about 3 days, which is quite remarkable. It took like a couple of years to design, but the whole idea is it's now replicable. So everything is a template, is the idea, and that's the only way we can ever possibly achieve what we need to in the time frames available.
With that thought in mind, a question from Derek Whittingham, who's now retired, has said, for those of us who live in an apartment block, is it sensible to install charging points in our private car park, or should we wait for petrol stations to eventually convert? Do you think, in other words, the transition to the infrastructure that we need for people like Derek, and I know many people who think in the same way, do you think that will be here soon enough? And do you see any signs of that from the conversations that you're having with people in the industry?
So I obviously would say, because I'm trying to deliver sustainable energy and move the needle on climate change, that you should do it now.
Yeah.
Because we need to get on with stuff, and it's really important. And if everyone was to wait, then we'd have a problem. If everyone was to do it now, then we'd possibly solve that problem. And if you can put chargers in the basement of your flat, great. It is quite tricky in shared environments. We also have solutions we've been working on to do that. But in terms of the petrol forecourt piece, then every petrol forecourt is putting chargers in as far as we're aware. And that will be fine for a while. In fact, if you do it now, you get an electric car now, it'll be fine. It won't be fine in a couple of years when there's lots of electric cars and there's only a few chargers. But no, I would recommend getting on with stuff because we need to. And if you're having issues working out how to sort it out in your apartment, I might be able to give you some tips, Derek, on how to do it, because it is a bit tricky, particularly when you've got lots of different dwellings and shared space. How do you administer billing? Who pays the bill? How does that work? How do you manage it? All that stuff.
And that may be where government can start to influence and change for people, whether it's the local council level or more national. We've seen how we can suddenly have a lot of direct engagement, should we say, from government when they want to.
I mean, I personally think that the government is doing an incredible job in supporting the space. The government gets a lot of grief. I came from the solar industry before this, and we gave the government a lot of grief from changing the subsidies very quickly. But it's kind of the opposite here, that the government is kind of pushing industry harder than industry wants to. Bringing in the ban for petrol and diesel cars in 8.5 years from now was a thing that industry obviously pushed back heavily, and they've done it. The Climate Change Act, which is what the fundamental piece of legislation is that's driving all of this, getting to net zero carbon emissions in 28.5 years is being put in place by the government, and that was Theresa May's government. Well, Theresa May for finally going from it was quite wishy-washy, and then they went no net zero, because it was before all reducing by X amount of emissions by Y date based on this, and she just said no, we're getting to zero, we're net zero. And that's kind of created a firm basis that everyone knows where we're heading, and it's quite uncomfortable, I think, for industry. It's an incredibly difficult thing to actually do. More than 100 years of automotive innovation, and we've got less than 10 years to go to from where we are to banning petrol and diesel. Equally, the grid is happening at that time, and we've got to electrify heat, and we've got to do all these other things. And that's being driven by the government. So, personally, I think it's very easy to bash government. It's very easy to bash anybody. It's very easy to criticise. It's less hard. It's a lot more difficult to actually do stuff yourself. So, I think personally they're doing a great job. They also supported us with building this, which was awesome. Whilst the majority of the money ultimately came from our private investors, they had the confidence that the government wanted it too, and the next one's as a result of building without any government subsidy. So. I think they're personally doing a cracking job, and I think there's a lot of things that possibly it's easy to bash government about, but in this particular one, I think they're doing really good.
Well, brilliant. Thank you very much, Toddington. That's I think a really great place to leave it, not bashing government and appreciating the support that they've given you and GRIDSERVE, and I think that reminding us all that we've all got to take the action today to move the dial, to deliver that change, and actually, it's incumbent on each of us to find ways to actually influence that change. And I think the infrastructure piece is absolutely crucial to help people feel reassured that they can. And so I'm an EV driver myself, and I'm very grateful you're here. I've used this space many, many times, and not just because we work together. So thank you very much, Toddington.
Likewise, thank you everyone.
Thank you. So we're now joined through the power of technology. In Technology Corner, we have Andrew today. We had Adrian on Monday. But we're now joined through the power of technology by Ian Butcher from Intel. And Ian is central to all of the good work that Intel is doing, the exploratory work and the infrastructure design, the IoT design that's related to forecourts and energy and the innovation that comes with that. Ian, I'm really sorry, that's probably not the best introduction that you've ever had, but it is the one that you've got. So
I'll take it.
With that, we'll hand over to you, and you can probably introduce yourself a bit more powerfully than that.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for taking the time and allowing me to do this. It's much appreciated. And I'm really pleased to be at this kind of GRIDSERVE site, although virtually, and I'm a bit concerned that my head's just massive on a screen somewhere, but I'm moving past that one. But effectively so I work at Intel UK. What we do, I'm the oil and gas, energy and utilities account director. And what does that really mean? We're here to help pull through Intel technologies. We don't sell to an end customer per se. We sell through OEMs and distributors, but what we do is we work with end customers and partners to help them understand their business problems, to understand how technology can help solve that, and really kind of work with our ecosystem, vast ecosystem and partners that we've got in place that take our products and do something wonderful and sexy with it and create some really innovative designs. So part of that, this conversation, the forecourt of the future, is something that for me started with one of my oil and gas companies coming to me and asking me what was our vision on forecourt of the future, which and this was back in beginning of 2019, so a little bit before the GRIDSERVE site was actually launched. But effectively, it started out as what is that? What is our view? And asking around, we didn't really have a view, so we sat down. And this is a little bit of I'm glad that this week we can open up. But we started working out what this would look like in a pub. Right? We sat down and we noted down what are the things that we think that this should look like. So this presentation, will talk a lot about the things that have already been mentioned. So it's interesting to hear that Toddington talk a lot about the things that relate to this. I'm pretty pleased by that in some respects, because it means that we're aligned on those thoughts and processes, and also looking to where that could go in the future, and maybe got some additional ideas that could help with that going forward. So if I just jump on. So this came to us as a little bit of a market assessment that we did in this space, and this is internet generated, so please don't shoot me for the numbers, but effectively around about 2017, so a couple of years ago, there were about 8,500 petrol stations across the UK. Now, to put that into perspective, if you look across to somewhere like Italy, they've got about 20,000. But if you look at the how that makeup is made up, you've got the big three, the BPSO Shell who kind of have the franchises on this side, the numbers, and then you've got some smaller brands, and then in the middle you've got this growth of the supermarkets that have got those brands in place there. And some of the interesting facts that were there was actually, the number of kiloliters of fuel that was being done. It was actually the supermarkets that were starting to do more, and we've seen many of those forecourts or those petrol stations decrease over the number of years. If you look back over the last 20 years, it's about 35% decrease in the number of petrol stations that are across the UK. And I think if you go for a drive today, you certainly do see that those petrol stations are now turned into car washes or a car forecourt that are selling secondhand cars, and not the petrol stations that they used to be. And this is where you've got this out of town supermarket that's put in place and is starting to enable people to go there for convenience. I'm going to go shopping, therefore I can fill up the car at the same time. And I think when we look at electric driving and electric vehicles, Toddington's mentioned a lot of this already, but a lot of the actual format hasn't really changed, and it's quite nice to see some of that starting to change. But ultimately, it's very much a shop in a box with four petrol station. You've got a canopy over the top, you've got a couple of pumps, and a shop to shelter you from the elements, but then you've got a shop you can go into afterwards. And now, as mentioned already, that the government are kind of moving fast and brought forward their plans for no new petrol and no new diesel vehicles in the UK from 2040 into 2035 and then 2030. That is showing a real want to go and drive that change. And that change is important for the many reasons that have already been mentioned. But at the same time, where we are today, we're about 2%-ish of those vehicles that are being sold are electric vehicles, and that will grow, and it will. I think every auto manufacturer. I think that interesting that the Toddington's foil that he put out was showing the number of vehicles that are on there that are all electric and options to purchase. That choice is available more, and at the point of the charging will get better. And again, mentioned you can get 100 miles in a certain period of time. But ultimately, it's this dwell time that's going to be of interest. It's no longer going to be a splash and dash, fill up. And if you're like me, fill up a car, you don't really want to go in and talk to anybody. You just want to do it at the pump and then leave. Now, that's going to change when you move to electric vehicles in terms of the way that you think about your process. And a little bit of a kind of anecdote here, but a friend of mine, we play golf every year, and we go away on a tour, and every time we go away it pours down with rain, and invariably the actual golf courses are shut, so we have to then travel somewhere else to go go and play. And this one, a couple of years ago, we played, and we went to a hotel, lovely hotel, had charging bays. He's got an electric vehicle, he parked up, couldn't actually charge because all the bays were taken, and then we had to move course because the one we were playing at was closed. Having driven a considerable while to get there in Wales to play, he said, "Oh, actually, I'm going to need to leave early in the morning to go find somewhere else that I can go and charge." So he actually left, went to another hotel, had his breakfast at the hotel, and then met us down on the golf course a bit later. So it was that thinking process that, at the moment, with the infrastructure we have in place, that needs to be thought through. And not everybody's going to want to charge at a petrol station because there may be off-street parking or home charging that's available to them. But it's just a thought process that they need to go through. But that's going to change in some respects. And if we look at and again, a lot of these have already been talked about, which is fantastic in terms of what's going to drive the adoption of electric vehicles. The range, the availability, the number of chargers, the more choice of vehicles, the cost parity between electric and diesel vehicles. All of that's coming to be more favourable towards electric vehicles, and I think that's where we will see that shift over the next 8.5 years, as mentioned, in terms of the number of vehicles are going to be needed to do that, and that in itself is going to provide some challenges. And it's really impressive to see what GRIDSERVE have done in terms of the effectively having their own sun to wheel process in terms of what that looks like, because there are a lot of other companies, big oil and gas companies, that aren't quite there yet. But one of the things that we have seen as part of that, and that dwindling that dwell time that is there, is that we've seen some decent partnerships come up. We've already talked a little bit about the partnerships with Costa Marks and WHSmith with GRIDSERVE. BP and Marks and Spencer's another one where they're putting up new petrol stations around the country, and my wife went into one and the other week, and it's just around the corner from us, and she said it felt like I was in Marks and Spencer's, not in a BP garage. And that growth of that convenience piece is going to become ever so much more important in terms of what can that look like. What's the opportunity there? The big oil and gas companies today that take revenues from petrol and diesel and not going to get the same levels of revenue from electric. And that in itself, it means that cost of that Mars bar becomes really, really important to them. And I think it was Bernalini that said that I think he's 175 million cups of coffee they sold a couple of years ago. So it just goes to prove that there's additional partnerships that are needed to be able to get increased revenue in that space. And then when you look at the technology that's coming, the lockers, the vending, the frictionless shopping, all of those things come into the factor as well. And we're starting to see more and more rollouts of the supermarket and the electric vehicle charging points rolling out as well. So there are lots of things that are going to be changing, and partnerships. We believe partnerships in action are going to be critical to that. And I think when we look at what does Intel really think about our view of what that forecourt could look like, it really comes down to the point that the concept itself turns the current filling station format on its head, and it brings the digital shopping experience and that connected customer cafe hub type experience, like a lot of the things that have already been put in place at GRIDSERVE, for maximizing that opportunity for passing trade, and the ultimate goal of creating customer loyalty. Because if you have a good experience, you're likely to go back. If it's a safe environment, if it's a secure environment, and if it's a really good experience, then that customer piece is going to be coming back. And I think as you start to look at the way in which we interact with the effectively with charging points going forward, it's going to become a very much a good point. And I'm pleased to see that one of the things that we wrote down, first of all, when we were talking about what forecourt of the future would look like, that Toddington called out toilets, because having a good toilet, a nice clean toilet at a forecourt is something that needs to be considered. And we broke this down into, from our view of it, was looking at forecourt kind of operations, so the management of the forecourt itself, and then the customer experience on the other side. Where does Intel play in this space? We kind of look from an edge to cloud. So Intel's involved, embedded into a lot of different processes and products that are out there. So there's vehicle recognition. So what type of vehicle is coming in? Is it dirty? Is it clean? Is it what type of charger might it need? What are the tire pressures running low? Is the tread on the tire wearing low as well? Could they be replaced? Is there franchise opportunities with other partners? Can you get your car cleaned whilst you're there? Could you get new tires fitted? These are all opportunities where you could use vision, AI, and machine learning to be able to start to do some education for you. The security and surveillance pieces are, is it today in forecourts themselves? A lot of the operators that work there get to understand when somebody's coming in to steal something from the store because of the way they park, where they park, how they approach the shop, what they're wearing, and some of that could that be AI? And again, AI machine learning used to help in some respects, so that it could provide a pre-warning, or is there opportunity to do some of for the actual operator there to approach the person that's coming in and saying, hey, would you like a cup of coffee, rather than having them steal something? Does that change a behavior? So there's things that we can do around, and many of our partners are working on these types of solutions. We then had, and just as I'm going through this, there'll be many more scenarios. I'm not going to go through all of them, but there'll be lots of different ideation in terms of what could become part of this. The car maintenance and charging, the chargers themselves, some fantastic chargers there, interactive screens. That experience starts at that pump, because it could be that actually the forecourt could be anywhere. It doesn't have to be in a petrol forecourt. It could be in a car park. It could be in a supermarket. It's your interaction point. Your first point of interaction is where you plug your car in, and what you want to do at that point in time. And if you have an ability where you can get maybe served up advertisements, we talk about getting people back into the high street, but if you talk about having adverts being served up to you, depending on your, again, from camera recognizing you are male or are you female, could it serve up appropriate adverts to you based on your car? Is it clean? Is it dirty? What could be served up to you? If you did a park and ride, so you get free parking if you parked in a certain place in a town. Can you get the advert served up for you from all the shops in the town? And would that then provide you a better experience? So all these things come back to driving that experience that's there. And once we kind of get inside the actual forecourt itself, then that experience of what does that look like? How is the whole building management run? Is it energy efficient? Today, I think in forecourts, there's generally gateways driving many different things: the Costa machine, the POS, the refrigeration unit, the building management system, the pumps even. And today, that are there opportunities to virtualize that data, that process, that such that it can be more efficient in running? And these are areas where, again, partners of ours can offer all of these things. And it's interesting that, coming back to this kind of the customer experience piece is as we approach, what do I do with my children whilst I'm there at the forecourt for an extended period of time? Can I pick up my shopping? Can I drop some dry cleaning off? Could I have a 5G works area? Is there an area where my kids could do some playing or have some entertainment for them whilst they're there? I love the idea of getting exercise bikes into the forecourts as well. I'm not sure how much sweaty people going around would be, but ultimately it's a great way to actually do something whilst you're there, and it's that dwell time which becomes really important. You could even argue that there's no reason why you couldn't have an optician or a dentist or a doctor, something that's in the forecourt that it becomes suddenly a different experience. And with that comes the connectivity, route planning. How do I make sure I got all the best connectivity there? But ultimately, that drives an experience. Can I use my reward points to claim anything on that I mentioned already? And those pieces that need to be managed, that data, and that's where Intel comes in really, because it's the process, manage and store. The data is where we have the opportunity to support with our technologies. As I said before, we don't actually sell any of those pieces directly. It's our partners and ecosystem, the providers, that can actually do that for us. And we're there to help to educate and also pass on, matchmake partners to customers, and ultimately that are trying to solve those challenges. Beyond that, and I will stop in a few forwards time. The forecourt could, as I said, could be anywhere. It could be at a restaurant, right? We've seen that there's restaurants that have had forecourts, have EVs charging stations put in outside their restaurants because they feel that the type of clientele that comes to their restaurants would be EV drivers. Hotels are a great place, park up, ride, and store and charge. And as we progress forward, there's the whole vehicle to grid piece, and that's an interesting play in terms of what does that mean for flexible energy, flexible storage. Love to get Toddington's views on that and where and how that could work going forward as well, because there could be car parks, there could be retail outlets. This is where you go out to your MacArthur Glen as an example, and you can park up, charge your vehicle. You can either give it back if you maybe get free parking if you give back to the grid. Or you park up and you charge, and you can use that experience, but that experience is what you're interacting with at that point in time before you go into an environment once you've left your car. And then the smart cities itself, is it car parks, is it NCPs, is it others branded car parks that could actually provide, again, that point in time of I'm parking somewhere, I'm going somewhere. I could be going to a sort of football game for a stadium. I'm going to be there for an extended period of time. I can plug in, I can get charged, and I'm fine for my journey home. And that really are some of the areas where we've seen, and it's great to see that all of this is kind of resonating in terms of some of the feedback that we saw earlier. And I think the piece that we can add and to see that this types of solutions like Peter, Beaver are there to provide those solutions that are with what we call market-ready solutions, which is our partners and partnering with that ecosystem to help advocate those solutions that actually do help to solve the technology challenges of our customers. And that's really it from our side. It's more of a case of that we're there, we're behind, we are thinking about this from a more holistic perspective, and really identifying the partners that can help us to solve those challenges.
Great, thank you very much, Ian. That's fascinating, and I think we're all aware that Intel is always at the forefront of technology developments and investing in that thinking. I think it's important that you've been able to explain today to our audience just how some of those significant changes are going to be able to be impacted and influenced through technology. We do have a few questions for you. Do you think that there's space for all the computing equipment needed for all of these solutions in a typical forecourt?
So that's a great question, and I think if you look at a typical forecourt today, as I mentioned, there are often either under the desk or in the back room. There's already about 6 or 7 different gateways that are kind of all stuffed together that are trying to drive that. And I think if we were to look at that slightly differently, more joined up cohesively, that then actually virtualizing that data on maybe an edge-based server would actually kind of save some of that space, save some of that time, save some of that power, and then offer multiple different capabilities run across the platforms.
And that edge piece is really key, isn't it, to how you can both commercially make it accessible to customers and also keep the technology infrastructure reliable.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately to the end person, right? It's about experience. It shouldn't matter about what technology is driving it in there. It just work and be able to make sure that they're getting what they want to do at that point in time. And I think that's if you can align on a common platform that across the board that helps to understand and manage and run the facility that you're in, will certainly, again, it's that being able to process, manage that and store that data, whether that be on site or in the cloud, a key kind of things to think about going forward.
I thought it was really interesting you're talking about AI, and obviously it's a very central part of EVs. When you think of Tesla and the other innovations that are going on in this space, with the work that Intel does with several AI companies, do you think it's possible to have a totally unmanned forecourt or service station?
It's an interesting one, actually. You've probably heard of the Amazon Go type of experience that's happening in the US, and they've got a live trial. I think it's in Seattle. They've got the store there that's actually running, and I think if you look at the vending type approach, in theory, there's no reason why it couldn't happen. You just stick a couple of chargers outside of that particular environment that you're going into, and you have a completely frictionless shopping experience. In some conversations that we've had, there's been even a conversation around actually putting in AI mannequins and looking at whether or not they are just to provide almost like a person that's there that you can interact with, that can do a certain level of interaction back and forth. But again, with nobody in the store actually there at all. So very interesting kind of concepts, things that are the future. I think if you also look at transport in general, autonomous vehicles, delivery drivers, I think everybody's experienced Tesco's deliveries or Amazon or the deliveries from the stores themselves in terms of groceries, because people haven't been able to get out or have been at home because of COVID and they're restricted to their travel movements. Actually, moving forward, would those become autonomous? Would they have that delivered to them autonomously in the UK? Obviously, the legislation would need to change to support that. But those we see in other countries, lots of autonomous driving happening. And it's amazing what that could look like too.
Thank you, Ian. I think that's a really great insight and a great overview for everyone that's joined us today. I think we'll look forward to exploring that AI piece and seeing how it all comes together and how Intel will sit at the centre of that innovation. And I'm sure you'll be talking again with us on that subject in the not so distant future. So thank you again for joining us. Sorry you weren't here to be with us today, but we really appreciate your time and insights.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. So that was really great. Thank you, Ian. Again, we're now actually magically keeping to time. It's only taken 3 goes at this week for me to actually be able to stick to a schedule. We're joined now by the fabulous Fiona Fitzgibbon. Thank you so much for joining us today, Fiona.
Thank you.
It's brilliant to have you here today, and I think one of the key elements, as I said at the very start of today's webinar, is how does this make money? And Toddington's explained the commercial models behind the fabulous services that we've got here and how they'll grow, obviously, over multiple sites. But there's also massive opportunities in media, and you've got such great experience over many different clients of exploring how that model will work. So you're going to go through that for us today.
I am.
Thank you very much. I'll hand the floor to you.
Thank you. Well, thank you very much. Thank you for allowing me to contribute. Hello, everybody. Hope you're all well and enjoying the session so far. When I first came to GRIDSERVE a couple of weeks ago, and again today, completely blown away, not only by this design, but the infrastructure and the capabilities, but it's very much customer first. So it's about the customer first, and then the customer experience. So if you do get the opportunity, do come down and have a look. It will really change your views. It's an amazing place. And I think what's really important is clearly this is a unique facility. It will definitely be the benchmark that others will try and emulate. As I say, customer first, which from a marketeer point of view and digital signage, that's really where we want to go. It's hassle-free and it's about time spent well. So that's a really key part to the property here. From a commercial operation and possibility point of view, as the network develops to scale, it's going to be really, really exciting, and it ticks many, many boxes of what most advertisers and commercial partnerships are really looking for. So whether we're talking about brand collaborations or we're talking about corporate partnerships, creating new revenue streams is really, really key, and immersing the customer in those experiences via digital signage will really help amplify that opportunity. So I'll step slightly out of the way. I know you've seen this picture already, but the real key to this is the GRIDSERVE Forecourt delivers really against advertisers and brand streams. High dwell times, so the average visit, as we've heard today, is about 20-30 minutes. High frequency of captive audience, and that's always key, but also very much a quality audience. So we're including in that, it's not unfair to assume, early adopters, environmentally aware, affluent. Through the meeting hubs, we've got business visitors, as well as local residents who are coming in to use the retail facilities here. And the right collaborations can really open up new audiences, new markets, different distribution capabilities, which add to that customer experience, whether it's a B2B or a direct to customer. Now, these are often long-term agreements that build together, and it's really key that it's about that shared vision where all the stakeholders benefit, but they share the responsibility and they share the reward. Identifying those right partners is always the best starting point, but well worth the time and energy that goes into it. So in this particular environment, digital out-of-home signage is a really natural... Oops, never mind. Is a real natural partner. Hopefully Andrew will be able to flick on my behalf. Is a natural partner. And it can create both new revenue streams as well as customer interactive and entertainment. So digital screens, as you all know, they come in all shapes and sizes, thank you very much, and very much dependent on those environments. So just to have a look at some of those, we have from arterial single screens, so arterial routes, then we go to multi-screens, so again, digital signage on a multi-layer basis. We have bus shelters, which you'll be familiar with. We then go into retail, which have more different casing, so slightly more architectural. So this is the Corrigan that you will know at Westfield. And then we have the whole transit infrastructure. This is London Underground with the digital ribbon, which works on a sequential basis if the creative will work that way. And then that goes through to rail concourse, rail platform, and also in office. So there are many ways in which digital signage engages with their customer, with the community, and also from an advertiser perspective. But from an architectural point of view, that's really starting to change. So some of you may be familiar with this, which is at West London. It's a beautiful signage just off the Cromwell Road. And then we have now in West Hollywood, which is going in now, these new structures as well. So we're starting to see a very different approach to digital signage, and that's the architectural and the framing in line with the environment, which is really lovely. But one thing I did want to tackle first is digital out-of-home energy usage. I think that's really important. And there's such a highly visible medium, and screen manufacturers as well as the media owners have really taken those responsibilities seriously and are really impacting the progress that they've made in their commitment. So in recent years, we've seen the out-of-home sector invest really heavily in reducing their energy consumption, and then also in their carbon footprint, and made significant progress, as I said. So companies have signed up to the Renewable Energy 100. They're committing to 100%, look at this one as well, 100% renewable energy across their LED networks, LCD and light boxes. We have solar-powered street furniture, 100% now recyclable skins or vinyls, which is across the static networks. Media owners are now using rainwater to clean a lot of those assets, so bus shelters and other areas. Landscaping is also taking place across a lot of the surrounding areas for digital screens, as well as monitoring air pollution, and very much in line with Toddington mentioned earlier, many of them are contributing to Trees for Cities. So they are really working hard in this particular area. And what's quite interesting as a step change is many of my clients, when we're working on creating new digital networks for them, one of the first questions now they ask is about energy consumption. So it's really good to see it have really raised up the level of questions. So I'm just going to do very quickly what digital signage is all about. So the advertising digital sign out-of-home market sector is about 1.3 billion. That's 2019, of which 50% was through digital out-of-home. So it's an incredibly big market. Understandably, the last 14 months, the out-of-home sector has been hit quite hard. It's been quite tough. But what that has allowed is the acceleration of ad tech adoption. So we have moved a lot further in ad tech, programmatic, AI, AR, which I'm going to talk to you about this afternoon. The screens we see today, they're really set for true immersive customer experience. Most of them have got the same capabilities, whether you're using them from a commercial perspective or you're using them for your community and your customer. So I'm going to show you how that canvas is used. And over the last few months, I will show you specifically, and I focused on Piccadilly Circus because it's a nice place. So the digital screens, this is customer user-generated content. So obviously for the NHS, this is being displayed across multiple screens. So it's being used as a fabulous canvas there. It's been used as a reminder of things maybe we all should re-look at. So this was done for Remembrance Day. And then live streaming the landing on Mars. So there are lots of usage for the digital screens that we have across the country. And it's about using them in the capabilities that they have. So as I say, whilst Piccadilly Circus is one of the world's most famous digital screens, both interior screens and exterior screens will have many of these capabilities. They're Wi-Fi'd, if they have ground, we can do that immersive experience as well. And we can deliver the most extraordinary content. The out-of-home sector is really coming back with gusto, which I think is really important, seeing as it's been a tough kind of year. And advertisers are really looking to deliver relevant, contextual content. And that really comes into the ad tech play. We're looking to widen the audience reach, and that specifically is looking outside of key cities where we suddenly see a lot more people doing work from home. So the digital networks are broadening their reach and looking to more valuable audiences. So making sure that your digital screen placement, elevation and visual lead-in for maximum visibility is naturally key, but it's the content and the creativity which really drives engagement. Augmented reality, as I mentioned earlier, and artificial intelligence are becoming more widely accepted and more widely affordable. Just to make sure everybody's in line with that, your augmented reality is digital content overlaid to real world environments. I'm going to show you a couple of examples as they have played out. They can play out on the big screen, or they can connect to your smartphone and play out on the small screen. So you can connect the two together, and we use that in gaming as well. So a few examples here that I just want to share. The first one is actually slightly older, but still fabulous, and was one of the first ones that really came to play. So I'm going to take you through, some will know this one. This is a bus stop. It's brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant. It was for Pepsi Max. It was done a little while ago, but absolutely fantastic. And you could see how those really interacted. They were surprised, they couldn't work it out, then they wanted to work it out, and then they started to film themselves. So especially the guy being chased by the lion. Fantastic. Now, another augmented reality is when you interact with what's going up on the screen. So you really are engaged, and I'm going to show you one that is National Geographic, and just look at the kids' faces. They're incredible, absolutely incredible. Now, what these do is, yes, they're great fun and creatively brilliant. They've got the space. What you'll notice with all of these is there's space for people to gather. There are markings on the floor. But it has cemented a memory attached to that brand into everybody who played with that, who witnessed that. So this is a great example of brand building. The other part is, although this may have taken place in one or two locations, it will be shared in so many places. So it's not just about that one experience. It then goes everywhere. It really travels. So this is two examples, and then I'm going to show you another, just creative, and this isn't done for commercial. This is just an example of how far digital signage creative can go. This has only come out in the last week or so, and it's come out from Beijing. think that's superb. I think it's absolutely brilliant. But if you think from an advertiser perspective, and again, customer engagement, once you start to reach to those levels where things look like they're coming out of the screen, it's the illusion, we really will start to move on at pace. So lovely on that. And then we've got artificial intelligence, and you will have seen huge amounts of that when you travel. So when you go to the airport, you will get gender recognition and all of that. So that's also come into the digital signage world, and we've used it quite a lot. So I'm just going to show you a couple of those as well. So one of the ones that kind of has been going a little while now is the car registration recognition. So there are specific messages that it will broadcast and display on recognising specific cars. So in this one, it's talking about, and obviously there's GDPR that we have to work with, but it's talking about the black hatchback. So that this continues all the time. This takes place. This is on West London, but it will talk about a particular car. So it will then talk about a Mini, or it will pick out a Porsche. So it's looking at that registration and going for the model. So we have already got recognition for registration, and then one that's used a lot is the weather. So the weather triggers a huge amount of digital signage at the moment. It's one of probably the most frequent, but this is one of my favourite ones, which is based on the snow report. So the coffee cub and the froth will depend on the snowfall. And I think this is a really good use of digital signage, artificial intelligence, fun, entertaining, fame. And that's really what digital signage is about. Entertainment, making brands famous, and using the capabilities within the screens. So I thought you'd like that one. We also have predicted language, questions and answers. I don't know if any of you saw the Gary Lineker Walker Crisps, and he did one where people went to a bus stop and they asked questions, and it was predicted what the answers were, and he answered the question. So again, there are lots of ways that is actually starting to come into digital signage. But whilst these are great fun, and they are really good fun, I'm a great fan of them, the network that we have here has all the opportunities to really drive that digital signage. As I said, it's got everything that an advertiser would want. So we have that 20 to 30 minute dwell time, we have a captive audience, they come as a destination. So there are plenty of ideas that you can use that 20, 30 minutes for. And I'm just going to look at a couple of those. So we have here gaming. Now this is connecting, as I said earlier, your phone to the screen. These take place occasionally. You've got to have the land around them to work with. But again, this is like a leaderboard that went on. So this is at Westfield at Shepherd's Bush, just as you come through. And then you have also more sport. So again, you've got more gaming that can go with big screens. So they don't always just have to be about advertising. They can be about customer entertainment, making games, playing, having fun, interactivity, and immersion. That's the real key to a lot of the screens that we work with now. So that more or less wraps it up. As I've already said, I think the opportunities to build a network for digital signage, both for customers and for commercial, is huge. There will always be the due diligence that goes behind that to make sure that those who get exposure to the screens share your vision. And I think that's a real key one. And watching sport. Lovely, tennis, great tennis fan. And I think there are huge opportunities to ensure that the two work really well together. And I haven't broken. So,
Thank you. So come take a seat. Thank you very much, Fiona. That was brilliant. I think it's really interesting, isn't it, when you look at some of those examples you show. I mean, the transparent, seemingly transparent end of the bus shelter is it's breathtaking, really, isn't it? And it
superb one.
Absolutely grabs you. And the anamorphic 3D experience that we're seeing coming out of China and Asia, which we're starting to see. I did notice there was one actually I saw on my LinkedIn feed in Piccadilly Circus for Netflix,
Yeah.
which didn't quite build in the building,
into the experience. I think that's where the Chinese example is so powerful, because it utilises that building space so well. Do you see then a big shift from advertisers in the digital space to really utilising the medium and the location to full effect?
Absolutely. I think because digital signage will be so much more data driven, there is a lot more opportunity to be contextual and to be relevant and move your message according to where your audience is. So you can move during the course of the day. Buying digital out of home through day part, so only buying when you want it, buying immediacy, so if you want it now, you can buy now in near real time. So it's very audience driven, and the creative opportunities are really starting to move. You will always get more broadcast. I mean, the out of home industry is not a one-to-one, it's a one-to-many. That's the point. It's a one-to-many. It's not personalised as in, Mission Impossible at the end of the film, as they all screen starts talking. So broadcast will still be a really big factor. But if you overlay that, so if you have a foundation of broadcast and then really start to use the creativity, I think it's a great medium to work with. Creatives love it.
Yeah.
The creative teams absolutely love it, and the only thing that stops them sometimes is they're not aware of what the screens can do. They don't know that screens are all connected and you can get them all to talk to each other.
And that's a challenge that I think Ian was talking about in terms of that connected infrastructure, and you're absolutely right. The technology partners like us have to be alive to communicating how it all joins up and how customers, clients can buy that infrastructure. I mean, just on that, just going back to a really simple question, how do you go ahead and purchase advertising space, on a billboard or a bus shelter like you show?
Well, we're moving much more into programmatic out of home. So programmatic out of home is a trading platform. So it's becoming closer to how you buy online. So you make a criteria for your audience, for your regions, your timing, your budget, so you can start to buy in that respect. We're moving away from buying by panel, so you're buying by audience. So that's really gained pace, certainly over the last 14 months, where a lot more media owners have partnered with the appropriate ad tech and programmatic platforms. You still can buy in the old way of 2 weeks, a 2-week cycle. You can still buy skin, you can still buy static, and they still have their place, and there's an awful lot of them. Not everything is digital, but they work very well together. So in that example, it is through individual media owners packaging up sites across their particular networks. And by that, before you get to that point, you need to work out, who's your target segment? When do you want it? How do you want it? What's your messaging? Is your messaging right for that environment? So all of that has to come into it, and that really comes after you do your marketing, work through your marketing segmenting and your positioning, etc., before you get to your media plan.
And for network owners then, that gives the ability to be more personalised, doesn't it? And to then engage with certain brands. So GRIDSERVE have relationships with different manufacturers, vendors and partners, and that could then lead into a closer, more personalised message that ties into those particular brands, for example. Just thinking about the messaging, do you think, and this is coming from our viewers, do you think outdoor advertising has to be so in your face? It's challenging then. Are there kinder examples that are more about the just pure goodness of the world, rather than just money and advertising and grubbiness?
Huge amount. I have to say, if you look at, again, the last 14 months, it would have been very easy for media owners to just turn the networks off on March 23rd last year. And they donated everything through to the NHS, to, as we saw, user-generated content, to Feel Good, to mental health charities. So there's an awful lot of that goes on. And that wasn't just during the pandemic. The media owners take a real responsibility, but they don't shout about it. They just do it to support a lot of charitable, environmental. So say we've got, the renewable energies. That's JC2Co, the first one there to sign up to the 100. Clear Channel with their program for Trees for Cities. So they Ocean works a lot with oceans. So they are all doing a huge amount of work, but they just do it.
And I think you're not talking about the good work you did actually in collaborating and corralling all of those different media owners.
Didn't know you knew about that.
At the beginning of the pandemic, and it wasn't just media owners; it was any digital surface, which is to be applauded. And thank you for all the energy you put into that.
It was great. It wasn't me. It's
Of course, but as a digital environment, owners of these estates did, as you say, come together really quite dramatically and very quickly.
Yeah, what started as a really just 3 nurses on BBC News coming off the night shift ended up being a global stay-at-home campaign.
Yeah.
Because they all put their hand up.
Yeah.
A lot of that, and then before I knew it, it was suddenly in America, then it was in New Zealand, then it was in Australia, then it was in Colombia, and it was just like, and everyone just said, I'll do it.
Well, I mean, that plays to Toddington's point of take ownership, do something, take action. So that will hopefully carry on. I think it did show the more conscious side of what advertising.
Of the industry.
Maybe it doesn't have a great reputation all the time, but it certainly deserves to. Another question then, just thinking about forecourts in the future, and the Middle East is an area of innovation, especially when it comes to digital, and there are some great examples of petrol gas stations wrapped in LED.
Yes, there are. I've seen one recently, yeah.
Do you think that they are particularly useful for media sales? Do you think there's an advantage in, and I'm hoping you're going to say yes, because Toddington's going to love it when I wrap these environments in LED. But do you think there's an advantage in a more broader LED kind of infrastructure, for example?
I think it depends what the purpose is. So the ones that I've seen are done more for decorative rather than commercial, and they look amazing. They look fantastic. So with anything, it depends where the conversation starts. If the conversation starts from customer first, then yes, and more often that will travel and be more successful rather than monetization. So again, it depends on the area, it depends where the customer sits within that conversation. It's always got to be customer first. It has to be.
Absolutely, and the value that's delivered.
And what's the benefit to the customer? What do they get? Even if it's entertainment, that's great.
The why.
But yes, it's just, why are you doing it? Yeah, why are you doing it?
It should drive everything. So another comment and a final question perhaps. Excellent presentation, thank you, from the viewer. Some great futuristic stuff that you showed there. 10 years from now, what do you think the digital out-of-home industry could look like?
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, the digital out-of-home industry in the last year has accelerated, the adoption of ad tech. There is always a place, even I believe 10 years from now, there is still a place for static. Now, that doesn't have to be a skin. It depends what that looks like. We're still going to be beholden to restrictions on content. So, in this country, other than Piccadilly Circus, you cannot run full video on roadside for distraction for drivers. So we'll still have restrictions probably in place. We will be, the relevance and contextual content is the driving force behind it. So making sure that it's less just straight broadcast, so that you do have those layers of, is that in the right environment? Is that fit for purpose? The other area I think that will come together is content with media planning. So I've worked in the industry a long time, and they are absolutely separated. So when I was at Samsung and we developed Shell Media, the purpose for that was to bring them together. So creatives didn't start to create unless they understood what the media plan would look like. How was their creative going to be viewed? How was it going to be consumed? What was the visual lead-in? Where were they? What was the mindset? And at the same token, a media plan wouldn't come together until we had an understanding of the creative thought, global assets, so that we could work it together. And once you start to pull that together, everybody wins. Everybody wins. And it will always amplify your engagement.
I remember that fabulous example, and going back to data in Piccadilly Circus, but just off on the LG screen with BA.
Oh, the
pointed plane, and just at
Brilliant.
that vantage point. That was 10 years ago, maybe more. And pointed the plane, so that's BA 279 from Johannesburg coming into land, and it really connected you to the brand, to the moment, and to the space. And I completely agree with you. I think that digital is all about the moment, the contextualisation, the relevance of that content. And digital out of home has been such an innovative space, and will continue to be. So I can't wait to see what comes next. Thank you, Fiona.
Thank
That's
you.
amazing. Thank you. Well, that just about wraps it all up now. Thank you to all of our speakers, and thank you especially to Toddington Harper and his team for hosting us here at GRIDSERVE in Braintree. Thank you to Adrian and Andrew for facilitating today and putting all the effort and energy into it. Thank you to the sponsors too for London Digital Signage Week, and to you for joining us on the live stream today. I hope it's been interesting and informative, and that you've gathered a little bit more information about what the forecourt of the future could look like. And if I know anything, I know it's going to be a GRIDSERVE forecourt that is the future. So thank you very much. Thank you to everyone, and thank you again for you joining us today. And we look forward to seeing you next time.